Right now, somewhere around your house, there are plants growing that you've probably spent years trying to kill. In the lawn, in the cracks by the driveway, along the fence, right at the edge of the raised bed. You pulled them. You sprayed them. You smothered them with mulch. And every spring, they came back. That should bother you a little. Because the average American household spends over $500 a year on lawn care, and a good chunk of that money goes into destroying plants that are not just edible, but in some cases more useful than the vegetables people work hard to grow on purpose. That's the scam, hiding in plain sight. We were taught to look at a perfect lawn and call it success. We were taught to look at volunteer plants and call them failure. And somewhere in that trade, a lot of people ended up paying to erase a free food system that was already trying to establish itself. Not 6 random weeds. 6 jobs. 1 gives you dense minerals. 1 fills an omega-3 gap. 1 works like a tougher spinach crop with a quinoa connection. 1 turns shady dead space into food. 1 feeds the soil. And 1 shows up before your garden does, right when fresh food is hardest to come by. Once you see the yard that way, the whole thing starts looking different. The fragile part usually isn't the weed layer. It's the expensive layer. Let's start with the one almost everybody knows. Number 6. Dandelion. We are spraying weed killer on a plant that can give you 558% of your daily vitamin K in just 100 grams of greens. Not a small mistake. A complete reversal of value. Dandelion has become the symbol of a messy lawn, but it did not get to North America by accident. European settlers brought it across the ocean on purpose. They wanted it close to home because it was useful. Food plant. Herb, reliable green. So the same plant people now hit with Roundup every spring was once treated as valuable enough to carry across an ocean. That should reset the conversation all by itself. And the nutrition only makes it harder to ignore. Dandelion greens bring beta-carotene, calcium, and far more density than most people expect from something growing beside a sidewalk. The leaves are useful. The flowers are useful. The root has been used for generations. This is not one of those plants that's technically edible if things get desperate. It has real range. It also refuses to be delicate. Spinach needs timing. Spinach bolts. Spinach gets chewed up. Spinach asks for good soil, attention, and decent luck. Dandelion doesn't care. It pushes through compacted ground. It handles frost. It sends down a deep taproot. It comes back year after year like it has already made up its mind about the property. And that matters. Because a useful plant isn't just nutritious on paper. It has to actually show up. It has to keep showing up. It has to work in the kind of yard people really have, not the kind they imagine in spring. Then there's the market secret. Dried dandelion root already sells in health food stores for real money. People buy it in bags. So when somebody says, well, maybe it's edible, but that doesn't make it valuable, the market already answered that. It's valuable. You're just used to seeing it under a mower blade. And if dandelion makes lawn care look wasteful, the next plant makes the supplement aisle look even stranger. Number 5. Purslane people buy fish oil while ripping purslane out of the garden bed with their bare hands. That's how upside down this gets. Purslane is a low-growing one with thick stems and small rounded leaves. It hugs the soil. It doesn't look important. It definitely doesn't look like the kind of plant people spend money trying to replace with capsules. And yet, it contains 300 to 400 milligrams of alpha-linolenic acid per 100 grams. In plain English, it's one of the best plant sources of omega-3 you're likely to find growing wild in a yard. That alone would make it interesting. What really sells it, though, is when it shows up and how it behaves. Walk outside in late August. Tomatoes stressed. Lettuce long gone. Soil drying fast. Hose dragged across the yard again. The garden that looked full of promise in May is now asking for help every other day. Purslane likes that weather. It uses C4 photosynthesis. which is exactly why it handles heat and drought so well. While softer crops are starting to surrender, purslane is still there, still green, still growing low and steady like summer never bothered it in the first place. That's not just a nutrition story, it's a survival story. No pampering, no special bed, no hovering over it with a watering wand. It's one of the few plants in the yard that actually looks built for the hardest stretch of the season. So step back and look at the logic. People buy supplements to cover an omega-3 gap. People spend water trying to keep tender greens alive in high heat. And in the middle of that, a free plant, solving both parts of the problem, gets yanked out and tossed aside. Bad trade. Especially when you realize that some gardeners spend all season babying spinach, while its tougher, more productive cousin is already volunteering just a few feet away. That's lamb's quarters. Some gardeners baby spinach all season, while its tougher cousin is already volunteering a few feet away. That's lamb's quarters. Blue-green leaves. Slight dusty coating underneath. Easy to miss if you aren't looking for it. Easy to dismiss if you've already decided only planted crops count as real crops. But lamb's quarters deserves a lot more respect than that. For one thing, it's related to quinoa, so right away you're not looking at some random nuisance. You're looking at a plant family with real food value built into it. The leaves carry more protein than regular spinach, gram for gram, along with iron, calcium, riboflavin, and vitamins A and C. You can cook it like spinach. It softens down well. It fits into meals in a very normal, usable way. Then there's the history. Native American communities cultivated lamb's quarters intentionally. Not casually noticed, not tolerated, cultivated. They harvested both the leaves and the seeds. That matters because it tells you this plant already had a place in a working food system long before modern gardening culture trained people to ignore it. And history like that carries weight. Now bring it back to a real backyard. Somebody is out there sowing spinach, protecting it, replanting it, dealing with pests, watching it bolt the second the weather turns. A few feet away, lamb's quarters is already up, already adapted, already edible, and charging exactly nothing for the privilege. No seed packet, no nursery tag, no seasonal drama, just food. So I keep coming back to the same question with plants like this. How often are we calling something worthless just because nobody sold it to us first? Because that habit runs deep in gardening. And the next plant proves the yard still has value in the corners most people barely count. Number 3. Wood sorrel. Most yards have little useless zones. Wood sorrel disagrees. This is the small one with heart-shaped leaves and tiny yellow or white flowers, usually tucked into places people half ignore. Under trees. Along a north-facing fence. In the cooler edge of a bed where the sun never quite stays long enough to make the space feel productive. Every yard has pockets like that. Not bad enough to notice. Not good enough to plan around. Just there. Wood sorrel gives those spaces a job. It has that tart, lemony bite because of oxalic acid, and that sharp flavor points to the thing that makes it valuable here. Vitamin C. Fresh vitamin C matters most when diets lean too hard on stored grains, starches, and shelf-stable food. It's one of the first things a food system starts lacking when the fresh layer disappears. So this little plant is doing more than adding flavor. It's filling a real nutritional gap in a part of the yard where most crops wouldn't even bother trying. That's efficient in the best possible way. Not showroom efficient, not seed catalog efficient, real yard efficient, the kind where the shady margin earns its keep instead of sitting there as decorative dead space. And once you start seeing that, the whole property shifts. The raised bed isn't the entire food system, it's just one part of it. Because some plants feed you, some plants feed the soil. And clover has been doing that job in plain sight for a very long time. Number 2. Clover. You kill clover, then buy fertilizer to replace the job clover was already doing for free. That loop should bother more people than it does. Clover is not just lawn clutter. It's a nitrogen-fixing legume. Its roots work with bacteria that pull nitrogen from the air and move it into the soil system. Farmers used clover on purpose for generations because of that function alone. Before synthetic fertilizer became normal, this plant had clear value. You planted it because tired ground needed help. Then lawn culture got involved. Uniform grass became the goal. Anything mixed into it started looking like a problem, and suddenly a plant that built fertility got demoted into a weed. Not because it stopped working, because it stopped matching the look. Ridiculous trade, especially when you look at what people spend now. Fertilizer bags, soil boosters, nitrogen products, all of it bought for the same patch of ground where clover was already trying to help. And clover brings more than one kind of value. Red clover and white clover feed pollinators. They cover soil. They soften the look of a lawn without turning it into bare dirt. Dried red clover flowers also sell through herbal retailers for real money, usually by the ounce. So once again, the market recognizes value while yard culture treats the plant like trash. That's not a plant problem, it's a framing problem. And if clover changes how you look at the lawn, the last plant changes how you look at the calendar. Because this one shows up when the garden is still asleep. Number 1. Chickweed. The most valuable plant in the yard might be the one that arrives before your seed packets matter. That's chickweed. Tiny leaves, fine stems, small white flowers like little stars if you get close enough to notice them. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't need to. Its power is timing. In most temperate climates, chickweed starts growing in late winter or very early spring. That muddy, raw stretch when the beds are cold, your main crops aren't ready, and there's almost nothing fresh outside unless you planned far ahead or paid for it somewhere else. That stretch is the weak point. Not July. Not the harvest photos, that gap between depleted winter stores and the first real flush of spring growth. Chickweed fills it. And that's a serious job, because in any real food security conversation, timing matters as much as quantity. A crop that shows up exactly when little else is available carries more weight than a crop that arrives later under easier conditions. Chickweed does that naturally. It tastes mild. It's actually pleasant to eat. It brings vitamin C, calcium, magnesium, and iron. One plant can produce around 800 seeds, and those seeds can stay viable in the soil for up to 10 years. So once chickweed settles into a space, it isn't making a one-time appearance. It's joining the yard's long-term memory. That's why it works so well as an early spring bridge food. Before the beds are fully awake, it's there. Before the catalog garden gets going, it's there. Before you've done anything impressive, it's already working. That's resilience in the form that matters most. Availability. And once you really see that, the whole list stops feeling like 6 interesting facts and starts feeling like a pattern your yard has been showing you for years. Pull back and look at the whole system. So what do these 6 plants actually give you? Dandelion gives you dense minerals and a perennial green that keeps coming back. Purslane gives you omega-3s and stays strong when summer heat starts knocking softer crops flat. Lamb's quarters gives you a protein-rich leafy crop that behaves like a volunteer spinach replacement. Wood sorrel turns partial shade into a source of fresh vitamin C. Clover feeds the soil. Chickweed fills the late winter, early spring gap before the main garden is ready to do much of anything. Not random, a working layer, and it's already there in a lot of yards without seed catalogs, irrigation plans, or another trip to the garden center. Meanwhile, the system people are told to trust is the one that keeps asking for more. More fertilizer, more spraying, more watering, more correction, more money every season just to hold the look together. Some cultivated crops are absolutely worth the effort. Of course they are. This is not an argument against gardening. It's an argument against blindness. Because when August heat rolls in and your tomatoes start stressing, when lettuce bolts, when timing slips, when life gets busy, The wild layer is still there, still growing, still adapting, still doing jobs you didn't have to assign. That's the power shift. You think you're managing the yard, but the plants surviving frost, drought, compacted soil, neglect, mowing, and bad placement are the ones built to stay. They were here before the latest lawn care trend, and they'll likely outlast the next round, too. So the better question is not, how do I wipe all of this out? It's, which of these plants is already doing useful work for me? That's where a resilient yard begins. Not by erasing everything wild and replacing it with purchase dependence, by noticing what is already alive, keeping what actually serves you, adding cultivated crops where they truly help, and stopping the habit of paying once to kill the solution, then again to buy back part of what it was already doing for free. So next time one of these plants shows up by the fence in the cracks or along the edge of a bed, don't reach for the spray bottle first. Pause. Look at it properly, because there's a good chance your yard has not been failing. It has been trying to feed you.